Right, so for those of you like myself who were asleep last night and forgot to look up to the skies, across Western Europe you could see Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink set of satellites. Is that right? Yeah, set of satellites fly across the sky. Bear in mind you didn't have clouds last night. And it is something to behold. It almost looks like a set of shooting stars all going in sync with each other, flying across the sky. It's quite something to see. For those of you who don't know what Starlink is, basically it's a sub-company from SpaceX that deal in satellites, primarily small satellites that are mass produced to create a constellation in the sky. Those satellites then sit in low orbit going around the Earth without obviously flying away or falling to ground. Now these satellites are built with the primary purpose of providing internet access via satellite. The advantage with that is because as opposed to going through ground routes, if it's in the sky, it can be anywhere across the world, so you can provide greater internet access to more remote locations. And that's advantageous for anyone who's ever lived in an area that has a dodgy Wi-Fi signal or can't get good internet, or if you live in remote areas where you just don't really have that much contact with the outside world. And because you are so remote, there is less infrastructure in place to keep you up with how the bigger cities cope with these situations of having up-to-date current broadband. Now the advantages of the satellites being smaller is that they're closer to the Earth. So that means as they're flying around, they're not moving as quickly as larger satellites. And this means that if one does have a fault or an issue with it, or does fall out of orbit, even just collides with something, just hits a bit of space debris, then it won't cause so much of an issue as a multi-billion pound large satellite that disappears. It can, because it's not moving as fast, there is a little more of a chance it may survive, or even if it's hindered, might still have some capabilities left in it until it's potentially replaced. The other advantage with using smaller satellites is that they can be mass produced because they are namely cheaper because they are smaller. And the advantage with this means that you can create more of them, which means that if it does successfully work, you can create more a lot quicker and provide the advantages that Starlink gives to more people around the world quicker. You get a quicker turnaround of improving that system. It also means that if there is an issue, it can be tweaked a lot easier than having 4 or 5 of these massive satellites that cost millions of pounds to get near to. They're traveling quicker, whereas the smaller ones, they're traveling a little bit slower, a little bit easier to maneuver and basically process. And because they're mass produced means if you want to upgrade them or create the next line that are that little bit better, you can go through those iterations quicker because you're producing them on such a high turnover. Because it's to be mass produced, the issue we have at the moment is with people over the years sending stuff into space, and generally just rocks and stuff hurtling through space that come into our orbit, is we have a high quantities of space debris within our Earth's orbit. And already we find there are a lot of issues with sending rockets into space because you need to time it perfectly so none of that debris collides with the rocket. And that's obviously, the more there is, the harder that gets. And we're not talking about, oh, there's someone just throwing a little stone or a pebble. These are massive rocks or massive chunks of metal that are hurtling hundreds of miles per hour at different rotations around the Earth, at different velocities, at different angles. And in order to time all that to get a rocket through it is incredibly difficult. And then if we add more things up there, so basically more satellites that are just massive chunks of metal hurtling at, I think it's something like 320 up to 720 miles per hour. And if you mass produce that up there, very quickly you're going to create a situation where the Earth becomes so encased in debris and satellites flying around that we won't be able to get any rockets up there, and SpaceX will ironically hinder the one thing they are mainly trying to do, which is to get people into space. So it's one of those kind of ironic issues that will need to be dealt with at some point. This is where I see if you're looking for a business venture in the future, one of the areas to go into would be collecting space debris, aka a space janitor. And that's because at some point, inevitably, we will need to have a way to safely clean Earth's orbit and empty it out so that we can send more stuff up there. Especially there's lots of little science projects where people attach a GoPro onto like a little hot air balloon and send it into space. But the problem is once it gets up high enough, it doesn't fall back down. So you've got lots of these little GoPros flying around, and at some point we're going to have to invent a way if we want to progress further, especially if we start mass producing these satellites and iterations of them. We're wanting to remove the old tech, bring it back down so we can launch the new ones. And at the moment we don't particularly have a way to do that. There are a number of ports being opened up, I think worldwide. There's a number of spaceports opening up in Europe specifically, and one of them's here up north in Scotland. I think way further up from where I am, but at least it's in Scotland. It would be great to see this brand new industry develop here in Scotland. It would be something for the win. But look at this view from my window. That's the water right there. Right, that's the end of the video today. See you next time.